you have to have things in your life outside of this work, outside that you say yes to, that you green light. How do you green light yourself every day? And I get rejected for grants, and I get rejected from theaters in terms of presenting my work all the time. But I have to be the one to say, you know what? I'm going to write this show anyway. And now we've discovered we have Zoom theater. So what if only 5 people show up? You have to find ways that you green light yourself and don't take it personally.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Perri Nemiroff with Collider, and today we are continuing our Creating During Times of Hardship series, and we are doing it with someone who is quite prolific in the solo theater space, Kristina Wong. Hello, and welcome to the channel.
Hello, Perri. I'm so happy to be here. This is my first. I've always been on the other end of SAG Foundation events, so SAG-AFTRA Foundation events.
Yes.
I recognize we got married.
We are very excited to have you in front of the camera, sharing some of your process and your inspirations with us today. First, you're going to learn this very quickly. I like compound questions. I like big old convoluted questions. My first question is a 3-parter for you. I want to know a person that you like to turn to help you power through creative lulls. I also want to know a place that you go to do that. And then on top of that, a thing, whether it's a physical thing or an activity you like to do that contributes to that as well.
Okay, well, I'll go in backwards order because the person who I always turn to varies. The thing I like to do lately, it's been going for a walk, or like, I'm going to get through this task and then I try to make it a functional walk, or as an excuse, like I have to pick up something from CVS anyway, so I'm just going to walk there, that kind of thing. That's always very useful. Sometimes it's Zumba in front of, I found a YouTube video that has no commercials and it's a Zumba lesson. And so I save a good $5 a class by doing that in my bedroom. But I also started using co-working space. I have a dedicated office space in my home, but I was able to find a co-working space that works within my budget and that I don't have to commit to a heavy lease to in Chinatown, and force myself to go down there and I go, okay, now you're working. Now you're thinking, now you're being creative. As far as like people I turn to, sometimes I ask Facebook. I do what's called the Facebook writer's room. Does anyone can help me understand or help me come up with an analogy for this situation? Or what's, most of the time it's terrible advice and I get really mad at everybody, but that's one way to sort of ask everyone to prompt me. And I have actually titled shows from suggestions that have come from that. I have run with cues that people have given me from that. So sometimes I do that. But I often, when I think about just one person to call, I think about maybe someone I've collaborated with in the past, or someone whose point of view I trust and respect. and someone who I don't feel will just tell me how they think it should look.
Yes, that's very important.
Yeah, this is so abstract that people have probably hit stop already, but please stay on. I've got good information. Stay on.
This is what we're doing. We're creating a bullet point list of things that work for you that hopefully can help someone else out there. And I want to go back to one particular thing you brought up in that answer, because I'm always interested in hearing about how someone sets up their home space in a way that's conducive to creativity and productivity.
I'm bad at that. That's why I had to go abandon my messy office and go to a different office. But that's, yeah, no, it's taken over 40 years and I'm learning you can't actually get work done in bed. I mean, get some other kind of work done, but you cannot get, I even got the bed that like moves and sits up like this and thought, oh, I'll just write my Great American. No, you need to like change your clothes and like and come up with a pattern. But I'm getting better at it, and a lot of it is figuring out is what times of the day I'm most creative and when to save all the paperwork, email checking for, and that tends to be later in the day when I'm more tired or restless. Like that's when I can do the stuff that doesn't require the freshest juice. So I'm getting better at that.
Okay, that makes all the sense in the world. We got some do's and we got some don'ts in there.
Yeah, I struggle. Who wants to listen to someone who's struggling? Here I am.
No, I mean, don't we all struggle though? Sometimes hearing about somebody else's struggles helps put your own into perspective, and you know, it makes you feel motivated to power through them if you know that you're doing it together.
Absolutely.
All right. So now I want to talk a little bit about the types of things that you like to create right now or in any times when you're dealing with something difficult. Do you find that what you're interested in creating during times of hardship differs during, you know, better days? And if so, how do they differ?
Oh, I mean, these last 3 years, which in March 2020, I found myself no tour schedule, no income because everything had been canceled, no sense of what I was going to do. And yet I couldn't feel sorry for myself because it was like, I don't have to risk my life to go deliver mail today or to stock shelves of a grocery store. And so that moment really had me thinking, I can't feel sorry for myself. And I think this is something I really encourage everyone to do, is to do what you tend to not do in moments of crisis, is rather than panic, is to think, what do I have left to give and can I help? And so if you're not familiar with my work, in March 2020, I started a group called the Auntie Sewing Squad. And we were a volunteer, we were supposed to be just a 2-week sort of stopgap until the government stepped in to help. Ended up going 504 days, but but we were sewing masks for some of the most vulnerable communities hit by the pandemic. And sewing is a skill that I had used previously to sew my set pieces and my props. And suddenly it was like this life-saving skill. You know, I infamously have sewn this vagina costume that I used to do stand-up in, and that was my practice before I started making this medical equipment for the rest of the world. And but that's what really fueled me was the immediacy of like, who can I support in this moment? And it's not like, okay, I have to give away everything I own to people, but I think that helped me understand that I still had purpose, that I still could be of support to other people and be connected to other people. So that whole process of running Auntie Sewing Squad, it went on for over 500 days. We were a squad of over 800 people all over the country. Some of them I will never meet in person. We distributed 350,000 masks that we'd made, hundreds and thousands of dollars of medical equipment we rerouted to places like the Navajo Nation and the border. And this all became the topic of a show called Kristina Wong, Sweatshop Overlord, which is the finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Drama. None of this I anticipated during this. But there was sort of a moment in the crisis of the pandemic where I was like, wow, my career is not the most important thing in my life right now. Like, we may all die. And I hate to break this to us all, but we're all going to die. So we got to think about like, well, what really matters in this moment? In this moment where I can't just go hide on an island. Some people did, but like, I can't just, run away from this. And it was really like, what can I do to support other people? But what I was witnessing felt so, we all witnessed something we never experienced, right? I was just like, I just started to entertain the aunties as they were sewing by making this show on Zoom, which was called Kristina Wong Sweatshop Overlord, which I thought, we'll never return to theater. We're never returning back to civilization. And I think having these spaces of play that were not about making the greatest show in the world and just about sharing actually freed me up a lot. So I was just running around my house on Zoom, telling these different stories of what I'd experienced. And in ways that took a lot of, I felt so much less pressure writing that show than any other show I'd ever made, where I was like, this show has to tour, this show has to win awards, this show has to be my income. Like, this one was just like, this is just a crazy thing we're living through. And I'm just going to tell you all what I'm seeing on Zoom because we're in a pandemic and I have to just tell you what I'm experiencing. So I don't know how that translates to all of you who are listening, but is there a way that you can create where you're not putting this pressure on yourself that like, I have to win the Pulitzer and I have to get the Tony, and what is that kind of freer space where you get back to just like, I just have to share this crazy story with you and here it is. And and in this moment of crisis, here's how I can enjoy this by giving you this gift of this crazy show I'm going to make in my house. That to me connected me to creativity in a way I had not experienced it before in a crisis, right?
I have so many follow-up questions. A bunch of
Yeah.
them are very big, but because of the example that you just brought up, I'm curious your approach to this part of the creative process, because clearly you came up with an idea and you did so much with it. So for you, what is it like bridging the gap between coming up with an idea and actually being able to execute it? What are some of the first steps you take to make your creative ideas a reality?
So the Auntie Sewing Squad, I just sort of thought that was us sewing masks, but it ended up becoming an entire social practice project. We've never heard the term social practice. It just means grantable volunteer work that somehow counts as performance, I guess. It's this term in the art world, right? That I've learned that I actually was doing by accident. Mutual aid is also another term I learned as I was doing it. But I think it was just acting on what was immediately needed, which was people needed masks, and I did not have the time and the materials to fulfill all the requests I was getting. So it was just literally waving people down on Facebook, hey, who knows how to sew, or who can help me cut, or who can help me drive some things? And people really stepped up because they believed that, we were in a crisis. We were in a crisis, by the way. I know there's some denial and like there's conflicting opinions as to whether or not COVID was real. It was real, folks. It was very real. I have friends who've passed away because of it. But they stepped up, and we sort of used ensemble theater skills, right? The same sort of skills. Okay, your job is this, your job is that. Okay, a friend who was a stage manager made excellent spreadsheets in terms of organizing. These are the organizations we've contacted, and they have people on the ground who will distribute the masks. I mean, it was really just asking who has these skills. And then there were people who didn't have skills to offer who were like, I could cook a meal for you. And I was like, great, because we've been running around like crazy. So that kind of organically unfolded. But like, I think in moments of crisis, you kind of see I don't know. I guess I'm not the kind of person that was like, oh, there are no materials, I guess everyone's gonna have to go without a mask. No, you look around, you go, bed sheets, you have that Sound of Music Maria moment where you go, curtains, play clothes for the children, right? Like, you figure this out. And so that's sort of, what I did is like looked around, put my mother to work, put all her friends to work. And that's really the opportunity that we have in a crisis, is to really look at what we do have and how we can utilize it, and not panic. Oh no, there's no Uber. What do I do? Like, you walk, right? Or you hitchhike, you figure out something. You don't give up. Some people did. And I'm here to tell you, I hope you don't do that next time, but you all have power to do something, to figure something out. Whether it's to organize, to cook, to do, what are you good at? What are you capable of pulling off in this moment? And where can that skill fit in to help support somebody else? Make phone calls, right? And that's really the gift of creativity, right? Is to figure out, we've been like every actor, even if you're the 2% that works on big sets, there was a moment, I would think, in your life where you were scrappy. And we have to tap into that scrappy side sometimes, where, like, who thought this right here, the Zoom camera, was a theater? We figured it out. This genre of Zoom theater actually evolved quite a bit over the course of a year. I saw some incredible things. I went to magic shows on Zoom, all these like crazy, I saw insane like people had configured their whole houses into sound studios. So we have it in us to figure it out. And I think it's, and don't be mad at yourself if you didn't figure it out, but I think we as creatives are the people who should be like sort of taking charge in this moment if we don't have access to all these things. It's like, but we are probably the ones who've had to figure out the longest how to make do with what we've had. And unfortunately, we have to kind of go back into those skills and figure that out.
You are flooding my brain with follow-up questions. I want to go back to the Zoom theater idea briefly. what is something about creating on Zoom that wound up being more creatively fulfilling for you than you ever could have imagined? But then also, is there like a next level to that you are reaching for and would like to tackle and add to that process next?
There's so many. I wrote this whole essay about 16 things about I learned about pulling off Zoom theater. I mean, you're your technician. This is a blackout, right? and like every room is a thought change, like every shift is a thought change. The filters that they have on Zoom are that's your 3D technology. What else I learned? It's actually like it would be really kind of after the show was over, the show, like we'd keep a Q&A open and chat with people in their living room. But you know, what we're used to doing after a show is, oh, let's go get something to eat. But I'd be by myself and tired. So I would have to learn to have a microwavable meal in the fridge that I could just pop in the microwave and just alone, those little things. But what was so fulfilling was like, one, I didn't have to memorize. I was just reading off a Google Doc. So, and just look at the green light, look at the green light. And so I could just put my focus into not like, what was that line? What was that line? To just giving the best performance and trying a new thing. But it was also, it just took the pressure of, wait, you got opera tickets? Where else you got to go right now? Like, this is the best thing in town. I put a show on in my freaking living room. I put my setup. I have a costume on. I have turned my office chair into a dolly. Like, what else? Where else you got to go, right? And that took a lot of pressure off this show, which really had no plot. It was just me just kind of like narrating all these strange moments I'd seen. And then the last scene of the show was whatever day we were at in the pandemic. It was sort of freeing. And I just was able to spit out a lot of writing. Whereas if I was given, Kristina, we're going to give you this residency at the theater, just 2 weeks, I'd be like, every day, I'd be like, have I done enough? Have I done enough? Is this worth the money? It's like, whatever, this was free. Like, just, you're washing the dishes anyway. Half of you are on the toilet. So I don't know. There was something about the fact that it wasn't the most important thing in the world. It was clearly not that made it sort of like, I mean, those of us who are in the business of being so convinced we're so talented that people need to pay for this, which they should. We also put a lot of pressure on ourselves, right? To constantly shit out brilliance, right? And something about just shitting out what you shit out was really freeing and great. And it's something I would love to tap back into. And I kind of am. I'm just like, oh, just pretend you're still in that moment when you were stuck in quarantine in your house and just spit stuff out and worry about how sexy this looks like to an awards jury later.
I have a very big follow-up question to something you just mentioned. I hope I find the right phrasing for something like this, but in a business, in an industry with so many artists who are pursuing what they deeply love so much, I feel like this can come up quite a bit. How, I guess, do you avoid, feeling guilty or maybe wrong about making something that doesn't make you money? How do you go about figuring out when it's okay to create, to do work for free, to do work for yourself versus when you have to, assert your worth in a situation and also just make sure you could sustain a livelihood?
Well, the sewing I did for Auntie Sewing Squad, I did not get paid for. None of us got paid for. And so much of how we felt like we were remunerated was in the care that we offered to each other. It's sort of why people, first elect to do community theater, because there's your social circle, there's your outlet, there's your therapist, right? Like, listen, the art is not therapy, but it is very therapeutic. Let's just say that, right? So that's why we do it. And that's why we were sewing, is we had created this community that was just so invaluable in terms of how it kept everyone going. What I have gotten paid for is doing my show. So I work in a little bit of a different world as a solo performer, which not a lot of solo performers are part of the world, where I have been presented with the help of foundations or schools that pay for my visit because they see the social value that my work has. So I don't rely on ticket sales to make my money, which I know is like to some folks. And that's because a lot of my work has to do with things that have social value and have a certain importance for people to witness. So for example, my show Kristina Wong for Public Office, which was cut short by the pandemic, but then I presented from my house. I figured out how to adapt it to Zoom, was about how I ran for office in Koreatown, Los Angeles, and won. I won an unpaid elected office with 72 votes, if you count the vote I cast for myself. And that was important for presenters to bring, because we were in an election year in 2020, and it was a great way to encourage folks to get out to vote, to think about voting, to think about running for office. And so these are the ways that in which I presented. Sorry, Kristina Wong Sweatshop Overlord, this recent show about the has been presented by Equity Theaters. It's a good freaking show, but it also talks a lot about community, the labor of women, the invisible labor of women. It's a document to this moment in history, addresses what it was like for me as an Asian woman to be making masks in a time when people were really angry at Asian people who seemed to be the carriers, quote unquote, carriers or originators of this virus, right? And it was a time of anti-Asian hate. So anyway, I this is a longer kind of conversation, like how do we monetize work that's about something? But I think it's important to think about the work you make, like who would value it? Who does it have value for? And can you make relationships with those entities to support you in presenting it? That is another 5-hour SAG Foundation conversation. How to make work as a solo artist. I don't want to like get deep into it, but to, you know, I do exist in that world where, because my work is, you know, has social value and relates to social justice, that I have found ways to support it outside of ticket sales.
I mean, one day I am very eager to have that 5-hour conversation, because it's a path that I'm not super familiar with and would love to know more about.
Yeah, no, it exists. And I highly encourage actors who are used to being at the mercy of being cast, of being at the mercy of someone else saying yes to you, to think about what would it mean to make your own work, and what are the messages that you have that are not being put out there by the things that you're auditioning for. And can you make it yourself? Because if I had to wait for a historian or a journalist or a playwright to tell the story of what I had experienced running the sewing group during the pandemic, it would never gotten told. And I was interviewed by a lot of press, and we never quite got into all the nuances of what we're experiencing. I had to be the historian, right? I had to be the living diary of what happened. So, yeah, so I encourage folks to really think of these moments of like, it's so scary, what am I doing, to like, okay, let's tap into that. And how does this relate to what other folks are experiencing? And what are the things that you're discovering? What are those little slivers of hope that you're discovering? For me, it was this community of generosity, and how can you share and report on that in your work to the world? And so that to me is what that show was.
So you just brought up auditions in that answer. And I do think dealing with rejection is something that is always well worth talking about, because in this industry, everybody goes through it. So 2 questions about that. First, more broadly, what is the key for you to forging forward in the face of rejection, and doing so in a way that doesn't allow those no's to change you?
I've been rejected a lot. I mean, obviously, if you're looking at me, if you've never seen me from my solo work, you might not have seen me that much on TV, because I'm not on TV that much. And I had to learn very early on, like, okay, you can't, the rejections I get from film and TV auditions, I can't take personally, and I have to find opportunities where I say yes to me, because I know those first few years in my 20s when I was auditioning, I just took it so personally and thought, well, then I'm not dateable and I'm not lovable and I don't deserve anything in this world because I've never been on a Tide commercial. Like, no, no, you have to have things in your life outside of this work, outside that you say yes to, that you green light. How do you green light yourself every day? And I get rejected for grants, and I get rejected from theaters in terms of presenting my work all the time. But I have to be the one to say, you know what? I'm going to write this show anyway. And now we've discovered we have Zoom theater. So what if only 5 people show up? You have to find ways that you green light yourself and don't take it personally. I mean, like the stuff that most of the people in this world watch is garbage. Do you want to be garbage? No, right? And I could name names. I could name names of these TV shows. Like, why are we so obsessed? Like, if you really need a lot of the world to watch it, then go get married on television. Like everyone else is getting married on TV, right? Go marry someone through a wall if you need people to look at you so badly. But no, what are the ideas that you really care about that you can say yes to yourself? And I mean, that's something that I had learned in this crisis. It was also weird. It's like, once I started doing it, people started to treat me as an authority. I was getting calls from nurses and hospitals and heads of medicine at the, at the different tribal communities, right? Like, why am I otherwise unessential actor fielding these kind of phone calls? Because I, for a brief moment, have projected that I am in charge of a sewing group and people think I know what I'm doing, and so sometimes you just have to say, oh, I guess I'm just doing it, and tell people you're doing it, and then people will believe you. We're just in a giant cult, everybody, a giant cult where we're all cult leaders, and maybe someone will gravitate to us. Okay, maybe we cut this. I don't know. Or maybe we keep that in because that was funny. I don't know. Listen to me, everybody. I'm a Pulitzer Prize finalist in drama who created a show on Zoom in a sewing group. Now the SAG Foundation takes me seriously. Love it.
It goes to show how many possibilities there are out there. And if you believe in yourself and your voice and you hold tight to that, then essentially nothing can stop you from making it a reality. And that is incredibly inspiring to me.
Okay, this sounds kind of crazy, but I during the pandemic, when I was getting all these phone calls from hospitals and stuff, I was like, I feel like, and then and towards the end of our group, we were getting calls from government agencies for our masks, and I was just like, I think we're just in a big banana republic and we don't know it. Like, everything is actually, we think there's a system and we're all acting within the system that we think is here, but there's no system. Like, people think that I am a hero. I'm here with a Hello Kitty sewing machine cutting up bed sheets, right? Like, nothing makes sense. So it's almost like you just sort of have to delusionally say, I guess I'm in charge, and and just take charge of yourself, your life. Like, all these entities will say, oh, you can't, no. But part of you has to be you're delusional enough that you decided that this was your career. You just got to run another 10 feet and make your own things. And make the systems, that make sense to you. I hope I have not enabled somebody to overthrow the government with that statement. I hope I've enabled you to create a solo show, though. That's sort of what I was pushing you towards. I don't know. Are you not going to use this? Is it none of this usable? I don't.
I mean, high hopes your answer and your experience will help pave the way to someone seizing their own ideas and opportunities and making it a reality like you did. Can you share an example of something creative you saw someone else do in the past 2 months that has inspired you, that's wowed you?
Something creative. Oh, gosh. I've seen a lot of good plays. I mean, let me sort of plug this project that I've done, which my friend Glenn Corrado, he's the CEO. My friend Glenn Corrado is the CEO of World Harvest Food Bank. It's located at 3100 Venice Boulevard at Arlington. And I had seen that Drew Carey, was never a fan of Drew Carey, really. I am now, but that he was going to pay for all the swingers and Bob's Big Boy meals of WGA writers going on strike. And I thought that was such a wonderful act of generosity and solidarity to be like, you know what, you're on strike, let me get your meal. and I thought that's so great. No one's going to do that for actors. And so I was like, maybe I'll approach Glenn and see if World Harvest Food Bank will offer actors like a small basket of food if they need it, because we're really getting hit by food insecurity right now. And he was like, right away, he said, yes, we'll do it. We're anytime a WGA or SAG member comes in and shows their card during the strike, we'll give them a giant cart of food. And to go to the end of the strike. If they want to come back every day this week, we'll give them a giant cart of food. And he created a step and repeat and a red carpet. Even though we're not shooting right now, we can still feel like the glamour of Hollywood, but inside the food bank. And I just thought that was a great creative way of showing solidarity, of creating a community space during the strike that isn't just a strike line, that just says in this very loving way, we care about you, we're not going to starve you out. But also keeping some humor and some love to it. I think when people hear the word food bank, they really think, I have to look like I've come out of a Dust Bowl era Dorothea Lange photo to use a food bank. But as it turns out, as actors, we're underinsured. We are food insecure, we're housing insecure, and I'm seeing over 100 union members from WGA and SAG coming in to take advantage of this offer. So to me, I know this is the same as like, I saw this crazy waterworks show, but to me, we find ways to creatively go, what do we have? How can we help everybody? And how can we make this a dignified experience? And that's what Glenn does in that food bank. It looks like a little local corner store. It doesn't look like a sad little food bank with dented, cans of chicken soup. And to me, like, these are the things that we can think about in our communities beyond, just the fancy shows that we're going to make, but how can we create these little moments of interaction as creatives that add dignity, that add love, that add respect, that sort of build towards the world we want.
That was a beautiful answer. I feel like that would have been a really wonderful way to end the conversation. And I do have to let you go soon, but I want to squeeze in one last question because I feel like nobody in this industry says good job to themselves nearly enough. So I love asking this question. Can you tell me something that you've accomplished in the past 2 months that you can look back on now and say to yourself, damn, I am proud that I did that even when all of this is going on and maybe getting me down a little?
Something I did in the last 2 months. Well, okay. I've been working on a project called Kristina Wong Food Bank Influencer. So a lot of this current food giveaway we're doing for union members is probably going to show up in the show. And the way we fuel the strike with food and making sure people are food secure is so much a part about fighting injustice and fighting for what we're worth, right? Part of the crazy plan of that show was to work with a market on the Navajo Nation. So there's only 13 full service grocery stores on the Navajo Nation. It's an area the size of West Virginia. That means people have to drive 3 hours round trip for fresh produce. This is why that area was hit 10 times harder by the pandemic, because it's just that much harder to access food, things. And if you can't get to those, you go to the gas station market. So you imagine trying to put your dinner together at a 7-Eleven, right? And I had befriended that market during our work as the Auntie Sewing Squad. And the plan was to sew a brand new interior with local seamstresses in this market to steer them towards healthier foodways, to celebrate indigenous foodways that are getting lost because it's mostly processed and junk food. And the market had to close. And it was like, I was securing a lot of grant money, like based on this, like one part of this grant that we would be creating this whole fabric installation in the middle of the Navajo Nation. It had to close because of weather damage. It's going to reopen, but it's going to take a few years. So I pivoted and said, what else can we do to support you? And they're like, well, we haven't gotten to really gather. It'd be great to do a ribbon skirt sewing workshop. So they wear ribbon skirts as part of their you know, as traditionally they wear ribbon skirts, and I helped hire the teachers and collected a bunch of sewing machines, and we got in a van. I got in a van with another auntie, and we drove all these sewing supplies, and we did 5 days of sewing workshops in 3 different communities there. So I was really proud of that, and that I was able to connect with this community that I had only sort of worked with like long distance, right, in terms of mailing, you know, the aunties mailing them masks and dropping supplies off, but connecting the thread, if you will, in a literal way. So I was proud of that pivot, and look forward to doing more projects in solidarity with them. I don't know if this is as fancy as like, I did a commercial and I was so, and then I took myself to Caro's after. I know that's not that answer, but that's, that's the answer I'm proud of.
Well, I think these answers are very valuable to hear right now. And I appreciate your time today and you sharing some of your experience, because hearing some of these things, you don't know who it's going to inspire, especially given your work in the solo theater space as well. Maybe someone didn't realize that was a path to pursue their own personal dreams, and now you've kind of cracked the door open. So thank you for doing that. And big thanks to everybody out there watching this program today.
Good luck, everybody.